42. Now, I have said on social media, Facebook, very present, that I was gonna do a video about the alt left, and I am. I'm just busy. I got a job, and I'm trying to keep it. So I work and stuff. The only reason why I'm jumping and doing this video is I was going to respond to somebody in a Facebook comment, and it's one of the usual things I debate on. I only, with some exceptions, but almost only debate on two things: reparations, ancient Egypt, / genetics. I should say three things and break it up. Population genetics, specifically, ancient Egypt, and reparations. Now, of the three, I would say I'm more pioneering, and I would admit when I'm wrong in that area too, but I'm more pioneering when it comes to reparations, because a lot of what I was saying in 2018 became late 2018 and 19, 20, 21. Like, if you look at my old video, Black Power's Meta, the only area where I'm behind, and you'll understand why if you want to be intellectually honest, was the amount when it comes to reparations. And the obvious reason is there was no movement when I was saying this. So if you come out in early 2018 and say 4 trillion, 3.5 trillion, people were like, that's a lot of money. And also, I didn't know about MMT. Look it up. I didn't really know how the Fed just prints money. I thought we were borrowing. I was ignorant to that. But I would say my weakness is reparations, because I will admit that it is the one thing I will debate about. Now, I don't debate about a lot of stuff where even if I think I'm logically wrong, I have to take a pro-reparations argument for the sake of survival. Like, I cannot take an anti-reparations argument. To do so is suicide when you look at the wealth data. I just can't do it. Now, with Egypt and population genetics, if I'm wrong, as people say, I think it's funny when they say, if I'm musty, tell me. I don't want to go out in public stinking. I'm gonna be wrong at times. I should do a video about all the things that I got wrong, thinking I know more than I did, and retracted it. And I've mentioned it at times. I've edited out stuff that was wrong in videos. And that gives me an advantage, because technically I can't lose a debate because if you prove I'm wrong, you educate me. You expand my knowledge. So I'm talking to this dude on this One Egypt site. Familiar conversation, because I see all these names: Mohammed Osama Mahmoud Mustafa. Like this dude right here. You do it way too much with this name. Oh no, it's two people. Okay. Mohammed Osama and Mahmoud Mustafa. Mm-hmm. I think your name is really Joe. Jared. I don't believe this. I don't believe that these people are Egyptian. And even if they were, I would not care. To me, what they're saying carries no extra weight at all. And I'm just like, this is a dude who's doing like this emoji laugh thing when it's the troll laugh. So, but let me get to the person I'm really talking to. Because what happened is this got turned off. Like, comments got turned off on this post, and I was going to respond. I can't do it because they turned the comments off. Now, we were talking about this recreation of Ka Eper. And I'm looking at this, and the dude says the sculpture looks West Asian. I'm thinking the fuck it does. When you look at Kai Epper, that head shape, especially from the profile, it kind of looks like a fat African. You could say, his nose ain't too broad. He's kind of got that little Booger McFarlane nose. But he's got a big kind of like Latino mouth. I say Latino because you see that with Latinos a lot, but you also see it with Africans. He doesn't have terribly big lips, but this is in the range of African diversity all day, every day, especially because I'm one of the people who say that Berbers are more indigenous than we give them credit for. So if I consider Berbers African, I consider Eritreans African, I consider Tutsis African, I consider Wudabe Fulani African, I consider Khoisan African. You just span the goddamn phenotype all up and down the planet. The only thing you might not have is extreme European, where you got like a witch look, where your nose is damn near touching your chin, or maybe like a really fat Eskimo. But beyond that, with Wudabi Fulani, Berbers, Eritreans, Ethiopians, Khoisan, anything goes. I see this statue, I'm like, I've looked at so many African tribes, I've seen stuff like that. So when you say he looks West Asian, I gotta call bullshit. And here's the thing, Egypt is right next to West Asia. A lot of the, like, if you look at bootstrap charts and shit, and just if you look at haplogroups, honestly, the Levant is low-key downstream from Egypt. So this dude, Sean Ruchti, I'm like, I responded, I'm going to have to read it. I'm like, well, it's African. This is West Asian. And I posted a picture of a Sumerian statue that got a broad nose. I posted a picture of a Nigerian statue that got a narrow nose. Well, a little nose. I won't say narrow. It kind of bows out, but it's a little nose. It's probably smaller than Booger McFarlane. That dude is kind of Samboic. And then the dude says the guy in the sculpture does not look out. I thought he was talking about the Nigerian one. Because to me, the Nigerian one, especially straight up. Now, if the profile's a little different with this and Kai, but straight up, the Nigerian one, to me, passes more as East Asian before West Asian. And Kai Epper looks like he could be, it was this one Jamaican rapper, I think, not the one that passed away, it's another one, but he looks kind of like a little chubby black dude. Like by African American standards, you might assume he's mixed, even though you got your Booger McFarlane's. But, like, and the thing, see, here's the thing is, they done whitewash Kai Epper. Like, he's on their whitewash list. So if somebody's doing a recreation, I'll show you the recreation. I think that recreation, because he's on their whitewash list, is triggering. So I'm like, okay, we kind of go back and forth. And he said, I'm talking about the original image. I'm like, he looks African to me. I ran his image on a lookalike generator, and I picked the first lookalike generator you find when you Google it. I put a picture of his profile in there, and the top, and this is like, it's going to be celebrities. So black is handicapped. African is handicapped in this. The top men, now women, it was pulling a lot of white women. I guess, like, you got your thick white girls and might look more like a black dude with somewhat narrower features, I guess. But when it comes to men, why is it pulling like African diaspora, mostly African Americans? I mean, so it had Michael Jace. That's that dude who's in jail for killing his wife. This fool. But I can see the resemblance with Michael Jace because they both got that big cheek kind of lean back head shape. And I ran it again with the picture. And when I ran it again, this is the type of shit I'm getting. Okay. So he says those features are not African in the sculpture. Your image of comparison is using African Americans' images who have a 25% admixture of European DNA. Like, and then he's like, besides, we don't need to rely on phenotypes. DNA has already been confirmed. He posts a link to Abu Sir study, and this time it's everybody reported that Abu Sir study. And I said, yeah, and I'm responding to both. I said, indeed, but we would need to look at all the mummies, not tested, not just 3. And we should put more weight on older populations who are definitely indigenous like these. And I'm showing Armana, Ramses II. I think it's like 11 mummies. They were predominantly related to Greater Africans. They are all older than your 3, and since they were royalty, they're more likely to be natives. Even the 3 you posted are not far removed from extreme Northeast African ancestry, since they are heavily related to Levants, and no non-diaspora is more related to Africans than Levant folk. That said, they're from a location that is known to have Semitic burials, and we didn't get their names. They could have been named Dan, Yayak, or whatever Semitic names, and we wouldn't know. But we know dudes named Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Nefertiti, Amenhotep, and Ramses are more Egyptian, so that carries more weight, in my opinion. Am I wrong? Did I lie? Now, this is the reason why I'm responding to this in the video, is because his response to me gets out, and I can't respond to him because they turned off the comments. And he said the study is from 90 individuals, larger percentage being older population, with the larger percentage being older population. But it's still younger than all the ones I listed, Armana and Ramses. He said they concluded that the indigenous populations had little to no sub-Saharan African, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. This dude doesn't know that it did test like 90, I don't know if it was 90, but it tested a lot more than 3. But when it comes to doing full genome and analysis comparing to other people, they only did 3. They only did 3. The others that were tested, all we got were haplogroups. I knew this years ago. I did a video about this. So we got a whole bunch of haplogroups and we got 3 full genomes. That's what I'm talking about. So with the full genomes, you can do an ancestry test and find out more. Also, he says that they had little to no sub-Saharan influence. How many sub-Saharan Africans did they compare them to? Not many. And not long after that test, they tested Neolithic Kenyans and they were finding relations to Abu Sir. They tested later on Neolithic, I think it was Neolithic, yeah, around that time. It was Neolithic and like maybe right after. It was Tanzanians, and you're finding some of that Abu Sir ancestry in them. Not long after that. So I was going to say, like, who knows, like, if they would have tested more people. Like, they didn't test a lot of Nilots. They didn't test, I don't think they tested Beja. They might have. And they didn't test, like, ancient populations. They were comparing Abu Sir to ancient, I think it was, I don't want to say Anatolia, it was Turkey. I'll just say ancient Turks. And that's like, when you have 2 ancient populations, and one is due north of the other, ancestry is all about who had sex with who recently, more recently. I mean, you can have more shared common ancestry before that, but it's generally about who had sex with who more recently. Like that video I did not long ago where I was comparing African Americans to European Americans and Egyptians, modern and both, and ancient. You have more African haplogroups, or check that, you have more quote unquote, and I'll get to this, Eurasian haplogroups in modern Egypt, but ancestry tests, from what I've seen with modern Egyptians, you'll see a little bit of Nigerian on them. And with African Americans, you'll see a little bit in comparison to European Americans, Nile. And when I did that test, that GPS test that tries to go back further, I had more Levant than Ashkenazi. And I was getting it from my African side because I'm like 1/3 European, almost, maybe 30%. I wasn't getting it from my European side because I had more Levant than Europeans too in that test. Now that test is whatever, but I'd say it's probably the best for going back. It's the only one that's like, we realize the limitations of these ancestry tests, so we want to overcome them with our algorithm. So I'll keep going. And he said, regarding your DNA tribes, the irony is that King Tut had a European haplogroup that has been tested, challenged, and reconfirmed. And then he like posts half of European males share. Well, that goes back to what I was just saying. Like, yeah, if you look at female haplogroups in modern Egypt, you would think, like Lioness was saying on Egypt Search, until I had to really like run it by him, like, nah, not when you do a whole bunch of ancestry tests. But you would think they'd be more related based on haplogroups to people outside of Africa, but not on like ancestry tests. And that's true with even modern Egyptians. Modern Egyptians are more related to Greater Africa than at least extreme, well, I won't say extreme, but like European American. Now, if it was Greeks or Italians, that might be different. On the flip side, if it was Fulani, I think Fulani might trump Greeks and Italians, but it also would depend on, is it lower Egyptians or upper Egyptians? I would think, and we can't say because we don't really have these tests. We basically have, like I said, a whole bunch of haplogroups from a more recent era, the Armana family, Ramses III, and 3 individuals. That's about it. I mean, you have some haplogroups from some other studies, but that's about it. And whether it's modern Egyptians or, from what I've seen, ancient, even though maybe not so super ancient, they tend to have haplogroups that may be more common outside of Africa, just like Tut R1b. But, and I'm saying this because I've had somebody accuse me of doing Photoshops and stuff, and I might have to mark up an image to demonstrate something. If I do something like that, it's not going to be in Photoshop. It'll be in Paint. It'll be quick, simple, because I'm trying to make a point easier to understand. This dude's saying I would do it to fool people. That is a straight up lie. I've never Photoshopped anything except for like a joke on a different Facebook account, where I'll Photoshop my son surrounded by a bunch, like where he's crying and throwing a fit, and he's surrounded by a bunch of like angry tribesmen, and it'll, some funny stuff like that. Or my one of my sons kind of had a gangster look on his face, and I put his face on a I photoshopped it onto like a image with a bunch of adult gangsters, even though he was only like 2 at a time, but he had that little Benny Siegel snarl, and it's stuff like that. I don't have to lie about Egypt. I don't have to lie. Like when I say that, let's just take R1b. First of all, we don't really have a high resolution haplogroup. And the reason why I say we don't have it is because Bioko from Egypt Search, who I interviewed way back, he said that like you could test it with a different test, his haplogroup, and get different results. I don't remember if it was E or maybe it might have been G, which would have been more European if it was G. But here's the thing, like, what I always bring up Hitler and Einstein because I don't really know too many other Europeans that got E. But Europeans that have E, they're European. Sometimes they're more European than somebody who has R, like on an ancestry test, or G. And G, as rare as it is in Africa, and it is very rare in Africa, G is found in pygmies. Man, this fool's running up on me like I want to do a drive-by. The hell are you doing? The hell? I'm in my car right now. So, and then, if I say, like, Clyde Winters, and here's the thing, like, when Clyde Winters said all haplogroups are African, I would never say that because you got haplogroups like S or Y chromo L. That ain't African. That ain't African at all. Y chromo D ain't African. You got DO, if you want to say the rare instance of DO means D is African. I wouldn't. But when you do have haplogroups that are, let's say, prominent in Africa, like R or T, but still more prominent outside of Africa, they tend to have an out of Africa. When we actually get the branches, we don't always get the branches, they tend to have an out of Africa pattern. Some are a little different, like you got a lot of invasion J, because Arabs said we sick of this old ass kicking shit. But they tend, like, whether it's M on mtDNA M, N is so rare you don't really have the branches, but you do have N in the ancient Sahara. mtDNA U6, U in general, RO, I'm going with the female R now. Now with the male R, you got little old P where it's too small to really get branches. But you got P in Africa where I predicted it would be based on an out of Africa migration. K is where I predicted it would be based on an out of Africa migration. I'm saying you should see it in Somalia. It's in Somalia. You should see it in Tanzania. It's in Tanzania. You should see it near Central Africa. It's in Central Africa. That's the ancestor. P and K are the ancestors to R. And they're in Africa, but we don't have, you ain't going to get I doubt we ever get a study on P, but you don't necessarily have the branches for K. So if it was like early K, like a weird PK or whatever, that would be like what you see with the other haplogroups where you do have the branches. And I'm talking about the ones that are prominent in Africa, not, stuff like I said, S. I'm talking about, H, mtDNA. I'm not talking about stuff like Y chromosome Q, even though it's in Northern Africa. It could have came out of Africa. It's rare in Africa. If it came out, I would think anything that's that rare probably back migrated. But then you have something like C. Y chromosome C. I don't know if there is an mtDNA C. If it is, it's not African, I'll tell you that. Them rare haplogroups like the Z's or whatever, that's different. V could be North African because it's so related to H, and you do have HV in Africa. But you look at where it came from, where these haplogroups came from, and you can make a case that a lot of this diversification was in Africa before it left. And in a sense, you have to have this. Because otherwise, you're saying the only haplogroups that mutated in Africa mutated so deep within that they would always be more prominent inside Africa, because the founder's effect would dictate that you're supposed to have haplogroups that come from Africa but are more prominent outside Africa because there was little to no competition. At one point, there was no competition. There are no Neanderthal haplogroups, period. Like Neanderthals have them, but there's none in Homo sapiens. So there's no competition that left any mark. The Neanderthal, quote unquote, admixture, since there's no haplogroup, could have been like around C in Africa with people who had like a substructure of Neanderthal. So you don't even need admixture to explain that. And since you don't have the haplogroup, you don't have real competition, because the competition is E and L. Those are some Homo sapien juggernauts. Care what you say. You look at how diverse and how many branches there are. It's no surprise that Hitler and Einstein would be, and I don't know, I haven't seen their full ancestry test, but I've seen other people who are E. They'll be like 99 point blah, blah, blah Europeans sometimes, with a quote unquote African haplogroup. Likewise, you get the DNA tribes test with King Tut. And since those ancestor haplogroups all the way back to A2, because I think it goes like A2, CF, F is prominent in Upper Egypt. It's sprinkled in other places, but it's prominent in Upper Egypt. That's a direct ancestor to R. Now, K and P in between it, but I think F might even be larger than K and P. I don't know. It's definitely larger than P. K, I think, has a founder effect explosion in East Asia and maybe like Australia. I always forget Australian haplogroups. I apologize. I need to look them up and just sticky them right in front of my face, because that would give me some indication. But I mean, still, whether the reason why I say you would expect to find it in Somalia, and you find it in more Somali than you do Arabians, but a low sample size. Let me put that out there. Actually, I know this one study that tested 90 Somali. I should look and see how much K they had in that study. But I digress. That's the response. Is R low key? Not even low key. I would bet R is African in origin. But like I said, you don't have a time machine to go see when the damn thing mutated. And the only thing that would really say, oh, I lost this bet, would be if we had K's African branches, but we don't. I mean, every time I see K, it's like, well, K? Like what K? But like Bioko was showing me, there's a whole bunch of K diversity outside of Africa. But if all of that is downstream from African K, that's an out of Africa pattern, just like with CO and C and DO and D. That's why I don't need to lie. Because if there was some great back migration, enough evidence would convince me. I'm like, damn, I wonder what made people go back and compete with established Homo sapiens when they had all this land to themselves. They had islands to themselves. It wasn't just Siberia. K, I think, is big on the Pacific Islands, like with Pacific Islanders. R, I've heard, I don't know if I've seen direct evidence, but I think R is with Native Americans. So you gonna have all of America to your goddamn self and then go back to Africa, all the way to Central Africa, and compete with Cameroonians. Because R is big in Cameroon, and supposedly K is too, at least from one study I've seen. And again, let me put an asterisk next to it because of the sample size. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say right now. 30 minutes is enough to rant. I hope, I've given you some food for thought why I debate what I debate. Because when it comes to genetics in Egypt, I can't lose because if I'm wrong, my knowledge is expanded. Now, when it comes to, like I said, when it comes to reparations, I'll tell you right now, I'm gonna argue this until you could logic the hell out of me. And really, you can't logic the hell out of me because America is the reparations capital of the world until you get to black people. It's hard to get around that. I'll be winning reparations arguments with conservatives relatively regular because I show them, I'm like, look, before African Americans had all this wedlock, out of wedlock stuff, the wealth gap was big. It was like percentage wise about what it is now. Depending on how you look at it, you can say it's a little better, a little worse. Like late 60s. Now, sure, I won't get into go deeper into that, but you might, like, I'm a liberal, but you might get me to agree with some conservative stuff when it comes to the black family, to a degree here and there at least. You might get me to agree with some conservative stuff when it comes to family or football. But by and large, I'm a liberal. That's just like it. Part of it is, how can you not be a liberal if you're about black empowerment in the United States of America? Because if the United States of America was really about black empowerment, we'd be overrun with reparations. It'd be like, man, get this reparations off my back. I can handle my business myself. But it's the exact opposite. You got people who have that I can do it myself mentality. I'm going to do for self. But their do for self plans are not going to change the fact that you got a human rights violation induced caste system up in America and you're running it like it ain't there. And you got, like Antonio Moore talk about, you got the decadent veil and blah, blah, blah. So that's it.